The gunshot that rang through the dusty streets of Knights Ferry that August morning in 1877 changed everything, though Xander Vaughn would not understand how profoundly until much later. He had just ridden into town after 3 months driving cattle from Texas, his body aching and his mind weary from the endless days under an unforgiving sun. The shot came from the saloon, followed by angry shouting and the sound of breaking glass. Xander guided his horse toward the livery stable, deliberately steering away from trouble. He had learned long ago that other people's fights were best left alone. The livery was run by an old man named Pete, who took Xander's horse with gnarled hands and a knowing look. "You planning to stay long, son?" "Just passing through," Xander replied, though truthfully he had no particular destination in mind. At 26, he had been drifting from job to job for nearly a decade, never putting down roots anywhere. His parents had died of cholera when he was 16, and his younger sister had married a shopkeeper in San Francisco 2 years ago. She was settled now, happy, and he had nothing tying him anywhere. "Might want to find lodging quick," Pete said, running a hand through his graying beard. The hotel closed last month after old man Henderson died, and his widow sold the place to some fancy investors from Sacramento. Only place left is the Mariposa Inn, and last I heard, Delilah Valentine was struggling to keep it open. Xander nodded his thanks and collected his saddlebags, slinging them over his shoulder as he made his way down the main street. Knights Ferry was a small mining town nestled along the Stanislaus River, its streets lined with wooden buildings that had seen better days. The gold rush had brought prosperity here once, but those days were fading. Now the town had a tired, desperate quality that Xander recognized from a dozen other places he had passed through. The Mariposa Inn stood at the end of the street, a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a crooked sign hanging above the door. As Xander approached, he noticed the front steps needed repair, and one of the windows on the second floor was cracked. The place looked like it was barely holding together, but it was better than sleeping in the open after months on the trail. He pushed open the door and stepped into a small lobby. The interior was cleaner than he had expected, with polished floors and curtains that had been carefully mended. A desk stood against one wall, and behind it was a doorway that presumably led to private quarters. The smell of baking bread drifted from somewhere deeper in the building, making his stomach growl. "Hello," he called out. There was a moment of silence, then footsteps, and a woman emerged from the back room. Xander felt something shift in his chest at the sight of her. She was perhaps 24 or 25, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes the color of honey. Her dress was simple calico, faded from many washings but clean and pressed. There was a smudge of flour on her cheek, and she looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "Welcome to the Mariposa Inn," she said, and her voice was warm despite the weariness in her eyes. "Are you looking for a room? If you have one available," Xander replied, setting down his saddlebags. "The name is Xander Vaughn." "Delilah Valentine," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, the hand of someone who worked hard. "I have rooms available. How long will you be staying?" "Not sure yet. Maybe a few days while I figure out my next move." She nodded and pulled out a ledger, her movements efficient despite the slight tremor in her hands. "That will be 50 cents a night, meals included. Breakfast at 7, dinner at 6. I do not serve lunch, but I can pack you something if you need it." Xander pulled out the coins and placed them on the desk. As Delilah reached for them, he noticed the ink stains on her fingers and the way her sleeve was frayed at the cuff. Everything about her and the inn spoke of someone doing their best with very little. "Room 4, top of the stairs and to the left," she said, handing him a key. If you need anything, I will probably be in the kitchen. I am making bread for tomorrow. Thank you, Miss Valentine. Please, just Delilah. She offered him a tired smile that nonetheless transformed her face, making her look younger and lighting up those honey-colored eyes. We are not very formal here. Xander carried his bags upstairs and found room 4. It was small but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. He could hear the river in the distance, a constant rushing sound that was oddly peaceful. He washed the trailed dust from his face and hands, then lay back on the bed for just a moment. The next thing he knew, someone was knocking on his door. Mr. Vaughn, dinner is ready if you want to come down. He sat up, disoriented. The light outside had changed, and he realized he had slept for hours. Be right there, he called, running his hands through his dark hair and trying to make himself presentable. The dining room was small, with just 4 tables. Only one other guest was present, an older woman who nodded at him politely before returning to her meal. Delilah brought out a plate of roasted chicken, potatoes, and green beans, along with a thick slice of the bread he had smelled earlier. This looks wonderful, Xander said, and meant it. After months of trail food, the simple home cooking looked like a feast. Thank you, Delilah said, and again that tired smile appeared. Let me know if you need anything else. She disappeared into the kitchen, and Xander ate slowly, savoring every bite. The food was delicious, cooked with care and skill. When he finished, he carried his plate to the kitchen rather than leaving it on the table. The kitchen was small and swelteringly hot from the stove. Delilah was washing dishes, her sleeves rolled up and her hair escaping from its bun in damp tendrils. You do not have to do that, she said when she saw him with his plate. I will get it. It is no trouble, Xander replied, setting the plate beside the wash basin. That was an excellent meal. I am glad you enjoyed it. She turned back to the dishes, and Xander noticed how her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. On impulse, he picked up a dish towel. Let me help you dry. Delilah looked surprised, then cautious. That really is not necessary, Mr. Vaughn. It is just Xander. And I know it is not necessary, but I have nothing else to do, and it seems like you could use an extra pair of hands. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to determine his intentions, then nodded slowly. All right, thank you. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Xander dried the dishes and stacked them on the shelves where Delilah indicated. The kitchen gradually cooled as the sun set, and he could see the tension in her shoulders beginning to ease slightly. How long have you run this place? He asked eventually. 3 years, Delilah replied, scrubbing at a stubborn pot. My husband bought it 6 years ago before we were married. When he died 2 years back, it passed to me. I am sorry for your loss. She was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling in the water. Thank you. It was a riding accident. His horse spooked during a storm and threw him. He hit his head on a rock. She resumed washing, her movements mechanical. We had been married less than a year. Xander did not know what to say to that, so he simply continued drying, letting her talk if she wanted to or stay silent if she preferred. He was a good man, Delilah continued softly. Kind, but he was not much of a businessman, and he left me with a lot of debt. I have been trying to keep this place running ever since, but it gets harder every month. The mining is drying up, people are leaving town, and I cannot compete with the new hotel for what few travelers still come through. The hotel that closed? Xander asked. Yes, but they are renovating it. It will reopen in a few months as something much fancier than this place. When that happens, I do not know what I will do. She pulled the plug and let the water drain, then dried her hands on her apron. I am sorry. I do not know why I am telling you all this. You are a guest, not my confessor. Sometimes it is easier to talk to a stranger, Xander said. No judgment, no history. Delilah looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them, some recognition or understanding. You seem like you know something about that. I have done my share of drifting. Xander hung up the dish towel, never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. That sounds lonely. It is, he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty, but it is what I know. Over the next few days, Xander found himself settling into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning he woke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. He would eat breakfast with the handful of other guests, then spend the day exploring Knights Ferry and the surrounding area. The town was small enough to walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes, built along the river with the old covered bridge as its centerpiece. The mines that had brought prosperity were mostly abandoned now, though a few die-hard prospectors still worked claims in the hills. But every evening, Xander found himself returning to the inn earlier than necessary, and every evening he helped Delilah with the dishes. It became their routine, this quiet time in the kitchen after dinner. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they worked in comfortable silence, but Xander found himself looking forward to it more than he wanted to admit. On the fourth day, he was walking back from the general store when he saw smoke rising from behind the inn. His heart lurched and he broke into a run, but when he rounded the building he found not a fire but Delilah struggling with a broken water pump. Water was flooding the yard, and she was desperately trying to stop the flow with her hands. "The valve is stuck," she gasped when she saw him. "I cannot get it to shut off." Xander waded into the water and examined the pump. The mechanism was old and corroded, and the valve had indeed jammed. He used his knife to pry at it while Delilah held back the worst of the water with a piece of wood. Finally, with a grinding shriek of metal, the valve turned and the water stopped. They stood there for a moment, both soaked to the skin and breathing hard. Then Delilah started to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound that nonetheless held genuine humor. Of course, this would happen today. "The roof has a leak. 2 of my rooms need new mattresses. The front steps are about to collapse, and now the water pump is broken." Xander looked at her, at the way the water had plastered her hair to her face and the flour from her morning baking still smudged on her apron, and felt something in his chest tighten. "I can fix it." She stopped laughing and looked at him. "What?" "The pump. I can fix it. And the front steps. I am good with my hands, and I do not have anywhere I need to be right now. Xander, I cannot pay you. I am not asking you to. You are already giving me room and board for next to nothing. Let me do this." Delilah shook her head. "That is not fair to you." "Maybe I want to do it anyway." The words came out more intense than he had intended, and he saw her eyes widen slightly. He cleared his throat. "I mean, I am here anyway. Might as well make myself useful." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing pride against practicality, the desire to refuse help against the desperate need for it. Finally, she nodded. "All right, thank you. But at least let me reduce your room rate. I will not have you paying to help me." "Deal," Xander said, and they shook on it, her small hand wet and cold in his. That afternoon, he went back to the general store and bought the parts he needed to repair the pump. The owner, a portly man named Morris, raised his eyebrows when Xander explained what he needed them for. "You fixing up the Valentine place?" Morris asked. "Helping out a bit," Xander replied carefully. Morris nodded slowly. "Delilah is good people. Had a rough time of it since Thomas died. Most folks in town like her, but liking someone and being able to help them are 2 different things. Times are hard all around." Xander carried the parts back to the inn and spent the rest of the day working on the pump. It was more complicated than he had initially thought, and by the time he finished, his hands were scraped and his shirt was filthy. But when he turned the valve, water flowed smoothly and stopped cleanly. Delilah had come out to watch the test, and when it worked, her face lit up with genuine joy. "You did it," she said, crouching down to examine his work. "This has not worked properly in months." "It should hold now," Xander said, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "Though the whole mechanism is pretty old, eventually you will need to replace it entirely." Her smile faded a bit. "Eventually, if I can afford it." That night at dinner, Delilah served pot roast that melted off the bone, with vegetables from the small garden behind the inn. Xander ate 3 helpings, and when he carried his plate to the kitchen, Delilah was already waiting with the dish towel. "I think I am supposed to dry tonight," she said with a small smile. "Fair enough," Xander agreed, and they fell into their rhythm. But tonight felt different somehow, charged with something unspoken. He could feel her watching him as he washed, and when he handed her a plate, their fingers brushed and lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "Can I ask you something?" Delilah said suddenly. "Of course. Why are you really doing this? Helping me, I mean. You do not know me." "You were supposed to be just passing through." Xander was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Honestly, I do not entirely know, but being here, helping you with the inn, it feels right in a way nothing has felt right in a long time. Like maybe I am supposed to be here." Delilah set down the plate she had been drying and turned to face him fully. "I am glad you are here," she said softly. "I did not realize how alone I had been until I had someone to talk to at the end of the day." Their eyes met and held, and Xander felt that tightness in his chest again, that sense of something shifting and changing. He took a step closer, and she did not move away. He could see the pulse fluttering at her throat, could smell the faint lavender scent of her soap beneath the kitchen smells. "Delilah," he began, not sure what he was going to say. The kitchen door burst open, and the older woman who had been staying at the inn appeared, looking flustered. "Miss Valentine, I am so sorry to interrupt, but I think there is a problem with my window. It will not close, and with the wind picking up, I am worried about rain getting in." The moment broke. Delilah stepped back, her cheeks flushed. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. Let me come look at it right away." She glanced at Xander. "Thank you for your help with the dishes." "Anytime," he said, and she hurried out with Mrs. Patterson, leaving him alone in the kitchen with his heart beating faster than it should. The next morning, Xander woke before dawn and started working on the front steps. The wood was rotted in places, and the whole structure was unsafe. He tore out the damaged boards and began replacing them with fresh lumber from the mill on the edge of town. The physical work felt good, gave him something to focus on besides the confusing tangle of feelings in his chest. He had been working for about an hour when Delilah emerged with a cup of coffee. "I heard hammering and thought you might need this. Thank you." He took the cup gratefully, their fingers brushing again. That seemed to happen a lot now, these small moments of contact that sent warmth racing through him. Delilah sat down on the porch railing, watching him work. She had a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill, and her hair was in a long braid down her back. "You are good at this. Did you work as a carpenter before?" "Among other things," Xander said, measuring a board. "I have done a bit of everything. Worked cattle ranches, helped build a railroad line, did some logging up north. You pick up skills when you move around as much as I have." "Do you ever think about stopping, settling down somewhere?" He paused in his work, considering. "Sometimes, but I never found a reason to before." "Before?" she asked softly. He looked up at her, meeting her eyes. "Before now." Delilah's breath caught, and color rose in her cheeks, but she did not look away. The air between them felt electric, full of possibility and promise. Then a wagon rattled past on the street, breaking the spell, and she cleared her throat. "I should start breakfast," she said, but she did not move right away. "Xander, about last night, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I understand if I overstepped." "You did not," she said quickly. "That is not what I meant. I just wanted to say that I have not felt this way since before Thomas died, and even with him it was different, comfortable and safe, but not." She trailed off, searching for words. "Not electric," Xander finished quietly. "Yes." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and made her whole face glow. "Exactly that." Over the following weeks, Xander threw himself into repairing the inn. He fixed the leak in the roof, patching it with tar and new shingles. He replaced the cracked window upstairs and reinforced the sagging floor in one of the guest rooms. He built new shelves in the kitchen and repaired the back door that had been sticking. Every day brought a new project, and every evening brought those quiet moments in the kitchen with Delilah, talking and laughing and slowly opening up to each other. He learned that she had grown up in Sacramento, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. She had met Thomas when he came to the city on business, and he had courted her with quiet persistence until she agreed to marry him. She had come to Knights Ferry as a bride full of hope, only to find herself a widow before her 23rd birthday. "I thought about going back to Sacramento after he died," she confessed one night as they sat on the back porch, watching the stars come out. "But I had put everything I had into this place. I could not just walk away. And maybe I was stubborn, wanting to prove I could make it work on my own." "That is not stubborn," Xander said. "That is brave." She turned to look at him, and in the moonlight her eyes were luminous. "I did not feel brave. Most days I felt terrified." "Bravery is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is doing what needs to be done despite being afraid." "Is that what you are doing? Being brave?" "What do you mean?" Delilah hesitated, then said, "You are letting yourself stay in one place, letting yourself care about something. From what you have told me about your life, that seems like it scares you more than anything." Xander was quiet, because she was right. He was terrified. Terrified of what he was starting to feel for her. Terrified of the way this little inn was beginning to feel like home. Terrified that if he let himself want this, it would somehow be taken away like everything else he had ever cared about. "It does scare me," he admitted, "but you scare me more." "I scare you?" She sounded surprised and a little hurt, not in a bad way. He turned to face her, taking her hand in his. Her skin was soft and warm, her fingers small in his calloused palm. "You scare me because you make me want things I thought I had given up on. A home, a future, someone to build a life with, and wanting those things means risking losing them." "Oh, Xander." Delilah squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I am scared too. I lost Thomas so suddenly, so unexpectedly. The thought of caring about someone again, of maybe losing them too, it terrifies me, but I cannot seem to help myself. You have been here a month, and already I cannot imagine this place without you in it." "Then maybe we can be scared together," Xander said. He reached up and gently cupped her cheek, giving her plenty of time to pull away. She did not. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. "Yes," she whispered. "Together." He leaned in slowly, watching her face for any sign of hesitation. When their lips met, it was soft and sweet, a gentle exploration rather than a passionate claim. She tasted like the mint tea she had been drinking, and when she sighed against his mouth, he felt it all the way to his soul. They kissed for a long time, slow and tender, learning each other in the moonlight. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Delilah rested her forehead against his, her hand coming up to rest over his heart. "This is happening very fast," she said. "You want to slow down?" Xander asked, though it would kill him to pull away now. "No," she said immediately. "That is what scares me. I do not want to slow down. I want to fall headlong into this and trust that we will both be all right." "Then let us fall together," he said, and kissed her again. After that night, things shifted between them in ways both subtle and profound. They were more openly affectionate, holding hands as they walked to the market, stealing kisses in the kitchen when no guests were around. The other people staying at the inn noticed, of course. Mrs. Patterson, who had extended her stay indefinitely, started smiling knowingly whenever she saw them together. A traveling salesman who stayed for a few nights joked that the food tasted even better now that the cook was happy. But their new happiness could not completely shield them from the harsh realities of Delilah's situation. Money was running desperately low, and fewer guests were coming through town as the mining continued to dry up. One evening, Xander found Delilah in the small office off the lobby, staring at a ledger with tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately moving to her side. "The bank," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I have a loan payment due in 2 weeks, and I do not have enough. Even if every room is full between now and then, I still will not have enough." Xander looked at the numbers in the ledger, his jaw tightening. The amount was not huge, but it might as well have been a fortune given the inn's current income. "How much do you need?" $50, Delilah said miserably. "I have 37, but that includes the money I need for food supplies and other expenses. If I use it all for the bank, I will not be able to feed the guests or myself." Xander thought about the money he had saved from his last cattle drive. It was not much, and he had been planning to use it to get himself through the winter, but looking at Delilah's tear-stained face, he knew there was no choice to make. "I have it." She looked up at him, confused. "What? I have the money, $50, you can have it." "No." Delilah shook her head emphatically. "Absolutely not. I cannot take your savings, Xander. You are not taking it, I am giving it to you. It is the same thing, and I will not do it. You have already done so much for me for the inn, I cannot take your money too." "Delilah, no," she said firmly, standing up and crossing her arms. "I appreciate the offer more than I can say, but I have to find another way." They argued about it for an hour, Xander insisting and Delilah refusing with increasing stubbornness. Finally, Xander played his last card. "What if it was not a gift? What if it was an investment?" Delilah paused. "What do you mean? What if I became your partner? I give you the money you need, and in return I get a stake in the inn. We run it together, make decisions together, split the profits together." She stared at him. "You want to be my business partner?" "I want to be more than that," Xander said honestly. "But yes, I want to invest in this place. I have spent the last month working on it, and I can see its potential. With some capital and hard work, we could make this inn successful. The new hotel is targeting wealthy travelers, but there will always be regular folks who need a clean, affordable place to stay. We could focus on them, build a reputation for good food and honest hospitality." Delilah was quiet for a long time, and he could see her thinking, weighing the options. "If we do this," she said finally, "it has to be a real partnership. Equal say in decisions, equal share of the work and the profits. I will not be your charity case, Xander. I would not want you to be. I am not offering charity. I am offering a partnership with a smart, capable woman I happen to be in love with." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had said it, and Delilah's eyes went wide. "You love me." "I love you," Xander confirmed, his heart pounding. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the first night I helped you wash dishes. I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same way yet." But Delilah crossed the room in 3 quick steps and kissed him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When she pulled back, she was smiling through fresh tears. "I love you too. I have been trying to be practical and sensible, but I cannot help it. I love you, Xander Vaughn." He kissed her again, longer this time, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally broke apart, they were both grinning like fools. "So," Delilah said, a little breathlessly. "Partners, partners," Xander agreed, "in business and everything else." They drew up a simple partnership agreement that night, splitting ownership of the inn 50-50. Xander contributed his savings, and Delilah contributed the inn itself and her years of experience running it. They shook hands formally over the signed document, then laughed at the absurdity of being so businesslike when moments before they had been kissing. The next morning they went to the bank together and made the loan payment. The banker, a thin man with suspicious eyes named Carlyle, counted the money twice before accepting it. "Cutting it close, Miss Valentine," he said disapprovingly. "Mrs. Valentine," Delilah corrected, as she always did. "And yes, it was close, but it is paid in full and on time." Carlyle grunted and stamped the payment received. As they were leaving, he called out, "Next payment is in 3 months. I expect you to have it ready." "We will," Xander said, putting emphasis on the we. Carlyle's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. Outside, Delilah let out a shaky breath. "I hate that man. He has been trying to get me to default so the bank can seize the inn. He never believed a woman could run a business on her own." "Well, now you are not on your own," Xander said, taking her hand as they walked back through town. "We are in this together." Over the next few weeks, they threw themselves into improving the inn. Xander used his connections from his cattle driving days to spread word about the Mariposa Inn to drovers and ranchers passing through the area. Delilah experimented with new recipes, creating hearty, delicious meals that soon had people talking. They painted the outside of the building, making it look fresh and welcoming, and planted flowers in boxes beneath the windows. Slowly, business began to pick up. A group of miners working a new claim in the hills started staying with them every few weeks when they came to town for supplies. A family traveling north to Oregon stayed for a week while their wagon was repaired, and the wife was so impressed with Delilah's cooking that she promised to recommend the inn to others. Even some locals started coming by for dinner, willing to pay a bit extra for a good meal they did not have to cook themselves. But the work was grueling. They were up before dawn and rarely got to bed before midnight. There were always dishes to wash, rooms to clean, repairs to make, food to prepare. They did everything themselves because they could not afford to hire help, and the physical exhaustion was relentless. One night, after an especially long day, Xander found Delilah crying quietly in the kitchen. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the cabinets, her head in her hands and her whole body shaking with exhaustion and stress. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside her and pulling her into his arms. "Talk to me." "I am just so tired," she said against his chest. "I keep thinking we are going to make it, that we are turning a corner, but then something else breaks or business slows down or there is another payment due, and I just do not know if I can keep doing this." "You do not have to keep doing it alone," Xander reminded her gently. "I am here. We are a team, remember, I know, and having you here has made all the difference. I could not have kept going this long without you, but what if we put everything we have into this and it still fails? What if we lose the inn anyway?" "Then we will start over somewhere else," Xander said. "Together. Delilah, this inn is not what matters to me. You are what matters. If we lose this place, we will find another way. We will find another dream to chase." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes red from crying. "You really mean that? I have never meant anything more in my life." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I love you. Not this building, not this business. You, your strength and your kindness and your stubborn determination to keep going even when everything is falling apart. That is what I am invested in. That is what I am fighting for." Delilah kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and he responded in kind. They had been careful to keep their relationship relatively chaste, both of them aware that they were not yet married and that there were proprieties to consider in a small town. But tonight, something broke between them. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and when Delilah pulled him closer, Xander did not resist. "I need you," she whispered against his lips. "I need to feel close to you, to feel like we are really in this together." "We are," he said. "I am yours, Delilah, completely." They made their way upstairs to Xander's room, clinging to each other, kissing between each step. Inside, with the door closed and locked, they undressed each other slowly, reverently. Xander had been with women before, but this was different. This mattered in a way nothing else ever had. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word of love was a promise, a commitment, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Delilah's head on his chest and his arms wrapped around her. She traced lazy patterns on his skin, and he played with her hair, both of them quiet and content. "We should probably talk about marriage," Delilah said eventually. Xander smiled. "Is that a proposal, maybe?" She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I know we have not been together very long, but I do not want to wait. Life is short, Xander. I learned that when I lost Thomas. When you find something good, something real, you should hold on to it." "I agree," Xander said. He sat up, taking her hands in his. "Delilah Valentine, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being your partner in every possible way?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Knights Ferry. Mrs. Patterson stood up as Delilah's witness, and Pete from the livery stable served as Xander's. The local preacher, Reverend Howe, performed the ceremony, and most of the town turned out to watch. Despite Delilah's fears that she would be judged for remarrying less than 2 years after Thomas's death, the townspeople seemed genuinely happy for them. Delilah wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Xander wore his best shirt and pants, his hair slicked back and his face freshly shaven. When he saw her walking down the aisle, his breath caught. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They exchanged vows in front of God and the community, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When Reverend Howe told Xander he could kiss his bride, he did so tenderly, aware of all the eyes on them but caring only about the woman in his arms. The reception was held at the inn, with the whole town invited. People brought food and drink, and someone produced a fiddle. They danced in the street as the sun set, Xander spinning Delilah until she was dizzy and laughing, her face flushed with joy. For one perfect evening, all their worries were forgotten, but reality reasserted itself the next morning. They woke in Delilah's room, now their room, tangled together in the big bed. Xander kissed his wife's shoulder, still marveling at that word, and she sighed contentedly. But when they went downstairs, they found Morris from the general store waiting in the lobby, his face grim. "I am sorry to bother you, especially the day after your wedding," he said. "But I thought you should know. I heard Carlyle from the bank talking in the saloon last night. He was saying that he is going to make sure you default on your next loan payment. He has been telling potential customers that the inn is unreliable, that it is going to close soon. He is trying to drive away your business." Xander felt his hands curl into fists, but Delilah put a calming hand on his arm. "Why would he do that?" she asked. "What does he gain from us failing?" Morris looked uncomfortable. "The bank has been buying up properties in town. They are betting that Knights Ferry is going to grow again once the new railroad spur comes through. They want to own as much real estate as possible when that happens. Your inn is in a prime location, right on the main street. If you default, they can seize it and resell it for a big profit. Is there a railroad spur coming? Xander asked. Rumors and speculation, mostly, but Carlyle seems convinced. After Morris left, Xander and Delilah sat in the empty dining room trying to process this news. What do we do? Delilah asked. We cannot just let him destroy our business. We fight back, Xander said. We make this place so successful that it does not matter what lies Carlyle spreads. We give people a reason to come here that is stronger than anything he can say against us. How do we do that? Xander thought for a moment. The cattle drives. The big herds come through about 50 miles north of here, heading to the railhead in Modesto. What if we offered a place for the drovers to rest and get a real meal? Not just a room for 1 or 2 men, but accommodations for whole crews. We could cook for them, let them clean up properly, give them a place to relax before the last leg of their journey. I know those crews, Delilah. I have been one of them. They would pay good money for what we could offer. Delilah's eyes lit up. We would need to expand. Add more rooms, a bigger dining area, maybe some kind of bunkhouse setup. We could do it gradually as we have the money. Start by spreading the word, building relationships with the trail bosses. Once we have a reputation, the business will come. It is a risk, Delilah said. We would be investing everything in this idea. I know. But I think it could work. And it would give us an income stream that is independent of the local economy. Even if Knights Ferry continues to shrink, the cattle drives will keep coming. Delilah was quiet for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Let us do it. We have already bet everything on this place and on each other. Might as well go all in. Xander spent the next week riding north to the areas where the cattle drives pass through. He visited ranches and talked to trail bosses, explaining what he and Delilah wanted to offer. Most were skeptical at first, but Xander's experience as a drover gave him credibility. He knew what the men needed, knew how to talk their language. By the end of the week, he had commitments from 3 different outfits to stop at the Mariposa Inn on their next drives through the area. Meanwhile, Delilah worked on expanding their capacity. She convinced Pete to help them build a large bunkhouse behind the main building, offering him a share of the profits from the drover business in exchange for his labor and materials. She also reached out to some of the women in town, arranging to hire them as temporary help when large groups came through. The first cattle crew arrived on a dusty afternoon in late October. 12 men, trail-worn and exhausted, led by a grizzled boss named Hartwell. Xander greeted them personally, helping them get settled in the new bunkhouse while Delilah and 2 hired women prepared a feast in the kitchen. That night, the dining room was full of laughter and the sound of men enjoying a good meal. Delilah served roasted beef, potatoes, beans, fresh bread, and apple pie. The drovers ate like they were starving, going back for seconds and thirds. Hartwell pulled Xander aside after dinner. "Your wife is a hell of a cook," he said. "And this setup is exactly what we needed. Clean beds, good food, a place to wash off the trail dust. We will be back on our next drive, and I will spread the word to the other bosses." True to his word, Hartwell did spread the word. Over the next few months, more cattle crews started stopping at the Mariposa Inn. Delilah hired additional help to handle the increased business, and Xander built more bunkhouse space. The income from the drovers allowed them to make improvements to the main inn as well, upgrading the guest rooms and expanding the dining area. But success brought new challenges. The work was harder than ever, with huge meals to prepare and dozens of people to accommodate. Xander and Delilah were exhausted most of the time, falling into bed late at night too tired even to talk. The easy intimacy of their early relationship was strained under the weight of constant labor. It came to a head one evening in January. A large crew had left that morning, and Xander and Delilah were cleaning up the aftermath. They had been working for 16 hours straight, and tempers were frayed. When Xander accidentally knocked over a bucket of dirty water, Delilah snapped. "For goodness sake, Xander, be more careful. Now I have to mop the whole floor again." "It was an accident," he said, his own frustration boiling over. "I am doing my best here." "Well, maybe your best is not good enough." The words came out harsh and angry, and as soon as she said them, Delilah looked horrified. "I did not mean that. I am sorry, I just—" "No, you are right," Xander said bitterly. "Maybe I am not cut out for this. Maybe I should have stayed a drifter instead of pretending I could settle down and be the partner you need." "That is not what I said." "But it is what you meant, is it not? You are exhausted and overwhelmed, and I am not doing enough to help." "We are both exhausted and overwhelmed," Delilah said, her voice rising. "That is the problem. We took on too much too fast, and now we are drowning. So what do you want to do? Give up? Go back to scraping by? I do not know." Delilah shouted, and then she was crying harsh sobs that shook her whole body. "I do not know what to do. I am so tired, Xander. I am tired all the time, and we never have a moment to ourselves anymore, and I feel like we are losing each other in all of this." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, because she was right. They had been so focused on making the inn successful that they had forgotten to take care of their relationship. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. "I am sorry," he said into her hair. "You are right. We have been working ourselves to death and forgetting why we are doing this in the first place." "I love you," Delilah said, her voice muffled against his chest. "But I miss you. I miss when it was just the two of us in the kitchen at night, talking and laughing and being happy." "I miss that too." Xander pulled back to look at her. "We need to make a change. We have proven the business works. Now we need to hire enough help that we can actually have a life outside of it. We cannot afford that yet. Then we make it a priority. We cut back in other areas if we have to, but we hire someone to help with the cooking and someone to help with the cleaning and maintenance. We make enough now that it is possible. We just have to decide that our marriage is more important than maximizing profit." Delilah nodded slowly. "You are right. And maybe we take one day a week where we close to new guests. Just one day where we can rest and be together." "I like that idea." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the messy kitchen, and Xander felt the tension between them begin to ease. This was not going to be easy, he realized. Building a life together, maintaining a relationship while running a business, it would take constant work and communication and compromise. But standing there with his wife in his arms, he knew it was worth it. They hired Mary Chen, a widow who had been struggling to support herself and her 2 children. She took over most of the daily cooking, working under Delilah's supervision. They also brought on a young man named David Wright to help with maintenance and heavy labor. With the extra help, Xander and Delilah found themselves with actual free time for the first time in months. They took Sundays off, closing the inn to new guests, and preparing simple cold meals for anyone already staying there. On their first Sunday off, they packed a picnic and rode out to a spot along the river where the water ran clear and cold over smooth rocks. They spread a blanket under a big oak tree and spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and reconnecting. "I had forgotten how much I enjoy just being with you," Delilah said, lying with her head in Xander's lap while he stroked her hair. "Not doing anything, not working toward anything, just being." "Me too," Xander said. "I love the inn and I am proud of what we have built, but you are what matters." "Us. This." She sat up and kissed him, slow and sweet. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Take me home and make love to your wife." They rode back to the inn hand in hand and spent the rest of the day in their room, relearning each other's bodies and reconnecting in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, wrapped up in each other, Delilah said quietly, "I want to have a baby." Xander went still. "Really? Really? I want to build a family with you. I want to see what a child created from our love would be like." She looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. "Is that something you want too, more than anything?" he said honestly. "I never thought I would want to be a father, but with you, I want everything. A family, a home, a whole life together." They started trying that night, and over the next few months they found a rhythm that worked. The inn was successful enough to support them and their small staff, but not so demanding that it consumed their entire lives. They made time for each other, made their marriage a priority, and slowly but surely built the life they had both dreamed of. In May, Delilah missed her monthly cycle. By June, it was confirmed. She was pregnant. Xander was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. He had no idea how to be a father, had no good model to follow since his own father had died when he was so young. But Delilah was calm and confident, and her certainty helped ease his fears. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she told him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "You are kind and patient and loving. Those are the things that matter." "I do not want to fail you," he said quietly. "Either of you, you will not. We are in this together, remember? Partners." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Delilah continued working, though they both made sure she did not overdo it. Mary took on more of the physical labor, and Xander was constantly hovering, making sure Delilah rested enough and ate enough and was not working too hard. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she finally told him in exasperation one day in October. "I know, I just want to take care of you. You are taking care of me, but I also need you to trust me to know my own limits." She took his hand and placed it on her swollen belly. "Feel that. The baby is fine. I am fine. Stop worrying so much." The next loan payment came due in November, and for the first time, they had it ready well in advance. They walked into the bank together, and Xander took great satisfaction in the look on Carlyle's face when they counted out the full amount plus interest. "Payment in full," Xander said. "And we will see you again in 3 months." Carlyle's jaw tightened. "You have been lucky so far, but luck runs out." "This is not luck," Delilah said firmly. "This is hard work and good business sense, and it is not going to change." They left the bank holding hands, both of them feeling victorious. But that night, Delilah woke Xander in a panic. "Something is wrong," she gasped, clutching her stomach. "The baby. Something is wrong with the baby." Xander threw on clothes and ran to fetch the doctor, his heart pounding with fear. Dr. Harrison arrived within 20 minutes and examined Delilah carefully. After what felt like an eternity, he emerged from the bedroom. "The baby is fine," he said, and Xander nearly collapsed with relief. "But Delilah is having contractions. It is too early for the baby to come. She needs to stay in bed, no work, no stress, complete rest for the next 2 months. If she can make it that long, the baby should be all right." For the next 8 weeks, Xander barely left Delilah's side. He took over her duties at the inn completely, working with Mary to keep everything running. He brought meals to Delilah on a tray, read to her to keep her entertained, and held her when she cried from frustration at being confined to bed. "I am supposed to be your partner," she said one night, tears streaming down her face. "Instead, I am useless, just lying here while you do everything." "You are not useless," Xander said firmly. "You are growing our child. That is the most important job there is. Everything else can wait." In January of 1879, on a cold, clear morning, Delilah went into labor. Dr. Harrison was there, along with Mrs. Patterson, who had become a close friend. Xander paced downstairs, wearing a path in the floor while he listened to Delilah's cries from above. Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a baby's cry. He took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into the bedroom. Delilah was propped up against pillows, exhausted and sweaty, but glowing with joy. In her arms was a tiny red-faced baby. "It is a boy," she said, her voice hoarse. "We have a son." Xander approached slowly, almost afraid he was dreaming. He looked down at his son, at the tiny perfect features and the small fists waving in the air, and felt his whole world shift. This small person was part of him and part of Delilah, a living embodiment of their love. "Can I hold him?" he asked. Delilah carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Xander had never held an infant before, and he was terrified of doing it wrong, but as soon as his son was in his arms, something clicked into place. This was right. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting. "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names but never settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Xander thought of his own father, the man he barely remembered but who had loved him fiercely in the short time they had together. "Samuel," he said, "after my father, Samuel Vaughn." "Samuel," Delilah repeated, smiling. "It is perfect." The first few months with Samuel were exhausting in ways Xander had never imagined. The baby needed to be fed constantly, changed constantly, and cried at all hours of the night. But even in the midst of the exhaustion, Xander had never been happier. He would wake at 3 in the morning to find Delilah nursing Samuel in the rocking chair by the window, moonlight streaming in, and feel such overwhelming love that it nearly brought him to his knees. They took turns caring for Samuel, working around the inn schedule as best they could. Mary was a godsend, often taking the baby for a few hours so Delilah could rest or so they could spend time together. Mrs. Patterson, who had basically become a permanent resident, loved to hold Samuel and tell him stories while his parents worked. As winter turned to spring and spring to summer, Samuel grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, happy baby. He had Delilah's honey-colored eyes and Xander's dark hair. He laughed easily and loved to be held and talked to. Xander found himself making silly faces and speaking in ridiculous voices just to hear his son giggle. The inn continued to thrive. The steady business from the cattle drives kept them financially stable, and word of mouth brought in other travelers. They were able to pay off the bank loan entirely in the summer of 1879, and Carlyle's face when they did so was something Xander would remember with satisfaction for years. "The inn is yours, free and clear," the banker said, clearly unhappy about it. "It always was," Delilah replied coolly. "We just proved it to you." They celebrated that night, just the two of them on the back porch after Samuel was asleep. The stars were out, bright and clear, and the air was warm and soft. Xander pulled Delilah into his arms and they swayed slowly, dancing to music only they could hear. "We did it," Delilah said softly. "We really did it." "We did," Xander agreed. "But you know what the best part is?" "What?" "This is just the beginning. We have the rest of our lives to keep building, keep growing, keep making this life we have created even better." Delilah pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "You are the partner I always needed," she said. "I did not know it until you walked through that door, but you are exactly what I needed. Not just to save the inn, but to save me. To show me that I could be happy again, that I could build a new life after losing Thomas. You gave me hope, Xander. You gave me a future." Xander felt tears prick his eyes. "You saved me too. I was lost before I came here, just drifting through life without purpose or direction. You gave me a home. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to fight for something, to believe that I could have the things I thought were only for other people. You taught me what love really means." They kissed then, long and slow and sweet, a kiss full of promise and commitment and love. As the years passed, the Vaughn family grew and prospered. Samuel was joined by a daughter, Rose, in 1881, and another son, Thomas, in 1883. The Mariposa Inn became known throughout the region as the best place for drovers to rest and resupply. Xander built additional bunkhouses and Delilah trained a staff of cooks to help her handle the increased business. Knights Ferry grew as well. The railroad spur Carlisle had been speculating about did eventually come through in 1885, bringing new prosperity to the town. But by then, the Vaughns were so well established that the changes only benefited them. They were respected members of the community, known for their hard work, fair dealing, and generosity to those in need. On a warm evening in June of 1886, Xander and Delilah sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel was 7 now, Rose was 5, and Thomas was 3. They were chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk, their laughter bright and joyful. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had just kept riding through town that day?" Delilah asked, her head resting on Xander's shoulder. "All the time," he admitted. "If I had gone to one more town, if I had chosen a different inn, if I had not offered to help you wash dishes that first night, so many small choices that led to this. Do you ever regret staying?" Xander turned to look at her, at the woman who had become the center of his world. There were lines at the corners of her eyes now, and silver threads in her auburn hair, but she was more beautiful to him than she had been the day they met. "Not for a single second. This life, with you and our children, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. I was so lost before I found you, Delilah. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," she corrected softly. "We built this together. Partners," he said and kissed her temple. "Partners," she agreed. Samuel came running up to the porch then, Thomas toddling behind him and Rose bringing up the rear. "Papa, I caught a firefly. Look." Xander admired the insect in his son's cupped hands, then helped him release it back into the night. Rose climbed into Delilah's lap, and Thomas demanded to be picked up by Xander. They sat there as a family, watching the stars come out one by one. In the years that followed, the Vaughns faced challenges and hardships, as all families do. There were lean years when the cattle business slowed, illnesses that frightened them, and the normal struggles of raising children. But they faced everything together, always partners, always a team. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who helped run the inn. Rose inherited her mother's gift for cooking and her father's business sense. Thomas was the dreamer, always planning adventures and exploring the hills around Knights Ferry. They were good children, growing into good people, and their parents were fiercely proud of them. The inn continued to be the heart of their lives and the heart of the community. They hosted town meetings and church socials, gave jobs to those who needed them, and extended credit to families going through hard times. The Mariposa Inn became more than just a business. It became a gathering place, a symbol of what could be built through hard work and love. As Xander and Delilah grew older, they gradually turned more of the daily operations over to their children. Samuel took over most of the management, with Rose running the kitchen, and Thomas handling maintenance and expansion. This gave Xander and Delilah time to simply enjoy each other, to travel occasionally, and to delight in the grandchildren who started arriving as their own children married and started families. On a sunny afternoon in 1900, Xander and Delilah celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the inn for a party that spilled out into the street. There was music and dancing, just as there had been at their wedding reception all those years ago. But now they were surrounded by the life they had built together, the family and community that had grown from their love. As the sun set, Xander pulled Delilah into a dance, just as he had so many times before. She moved easily in his arms, and he marveled that after all these years, he still felt that same spark, that same sense of rightness he had felt the first time he kissed her. 23 years, Delilah said, looking up at him. Sometimes it feels like yesterday we met, and sometimes it feels like you have always been part of my life. I will always be part of your life, Xander promised, for however many years we have left and beyond. Beyond. I believe some bonds are eternal, he said seriously. What we have built, it transcends this life. I will find you again in whatever comes next. Delilah's eyes filled with tears, happy tears this time. I love you, Xander Vaughn. You rode into my life when I needed you most, and you have been beside me ever since. You are the partner I always needed, even before I knew what that meant. And you are my home, he said. The place I belong, the person I was always meant to find. Everything before you was just the journey that led me here. They kissed then, in the middle of the celebration, surrounded by the love and joy of their family. And in that moment, with the stars coming out overhead and music in the air, they were not an old married couple but two people still deeply, passionately in love, still building their life together one day at a time. The Mariposa Inn stood for generations, a testament to what could be built through partnership and love. It became a landmark in Knights Ferry, famous throughout California as a place of warmth and welcome. And at its heart, always, was the story of a drifting cowboy who found his home in the eyes of a struggling innkeeper, and the life they built together against all odds. They grew old together, Xander and Delilah, their love never fading but deepening and maturing like fine wine. They faced the changing world hand in hand, adapting as the frontier spirit of the Old West gave way to a more settled, modern California. Through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other, challenging each other, and loving each other with a devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. When Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78 in 1929, Delilah held his hand and whispered that she would follow him soon. She did, just 6 months later, as if she could not bear to be without her partner for long. They were buried side by side in the Knights Ferry cemetery, under a shared headstone that read simply, "Partners in life, partners in love, partners in eternity." The inn passed to their children and grandchildren, and it continued to operate for many more years, a living legacy of the love story that had begun with a chance meeting in the summer of 1877. And though the world changed and time marched on, the story of Xander and Delilah Vaughn remained, a reminder that sometimes the most important journey is the one that leads you home.